Welcome, everybody, to the Monetize the Mic podcast. Now, if you're thinking, that doesn't sound like Jessica Rhodes or Margie Feldham, you would be absolutely correct. Let me introduce myself here. My name is Riley Baez-Bradway. I am a booking agent and team lead here at Interview Connections, and Jess very graciously allowed me to come on the show today and interview one of our favorite clients and someone who I love working with. So I'm very much so looking forward to the discussion we're about to have here, and really more than anything, what you all will learn from this seasoned vet of media appearances. So keep your ears open. I definitely might pop on and interview a couple of clients in the future. I actually have a interview lined up with Louise Bedford, the Australian trading and global business legend, and that is going to be a great conversation as well. So keep your eyes peeled. But in the meantime, the man of the hour, the reason that I am here, the reason I wanted to hop on this interview, someone who I've had no shortage of long form conversations with before. I would like to welcome Scott Schober, the CEO of Berkeley Varitronics Systems. And I've taken a lot of pride in working out all the syllables in that over the time we've worked together. It is a family-owned business of nearly 50 years of age down in Metuchen, New Jersey. And Scott is really a polymath, a man of all trades. He has a background in information security, business, and he's regularly on some of the most notable national and global news networks, CNBC, Fox News. He's been on Al Jazeera, Yahoo. If you can think of it, he's probably been on it to discuss something about crypto wallets being hacked or how business owners can stay safe in the course of the pandemic and all of the technology that's come around with it. So Scott, welcome to Monetize the Mic. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, so glad to be here. I look forward to a nice chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. So as I mentioned, and I'm sure is it's something that is piquing the curiosity of our listeners here, Scott, as someone who is on umpteen media appearances per week, I mean, even just seeing some of the scheduling that you've sent over and the time that you've been a client makes my head spin. Mm-hmm. And that's certainly not a bad thing to be keeping busy. But I would love to talk a little bit about really just the booking and preparation process for many of these media appearances that you have on a weekly basis, because of course these are multiple formats. You're on the TV, you're on the radio, you're on podcasts, you're writing blog posts, you're doing all sorts of things. And with that, there can be a lot of nuance that comes with your communications and your preparation and kind of tailoring each interview and call to action for each one. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, just in terms of some things that you found have really worked for you with kind of building some structure around such a busy process.
Yeah, excellent question. And I think I've only learned this over the years. I have to admit, I'm probably guilty. I did not do it right in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And what did I not do right is when you build up expertise in a particular area, you do gain a sense of confidence. And of course, the more interviews you do, and it could be any type of interview, you start to get into your little bit of a comfort zone. And I've kind of learned it's never good to be too comfortable. Mm-hmm. So having a little bit of fear, a little bit of nerves before an interview, be it a podcast, radio, TV, before you go up on stage and speak, I think that's healthy. And maybe to some degree, it keeps me humble a little bit. So I want to have a little bit of those butterflies going. And so if you feel that way, that's good, I think. If you're too confident, you get up there and sometimes you'll find you won't know what to say. Now, how do you know how you have that level of comfort and preparation? I think for any of these mediums, it's really just spending the time to constantly educate yourself and prepare. What I've learned to do with most interviews is to kind of just read over a few articles first, just to really digest it and then meditate on it. Sometimes what you're going to say, it's more important that it's fresh in your mind. When I do a podcast, it could be, audio or video or TV interview or radio. I always like to make it a goal to have 3 stats that I can remember just off the top of my head. And to me, that helps because there are points where you need to interject information or build upon a point, and it may be question asked, answered, but then you could tailor in or weave in an additional statistic that really sounds home the point. Mm-hmm. And I think that really just helps to make it a more enjoyable interview when somebody's listening in. And maybe give you a case in point. I've done a lot lately on ransomware. That's been talked about again and again and again. So maybe they'll volley a question out to me about, how bad of a problem is ransomware, Mr. Schober? And then I could respond, well, it's this bad, boom, this just happened, so on and so forth. And then I would usually add in fact, in the United States, every 11 seconds, there's another reported ransomware attack on average in 2021. Now, what that does is it takes just my standard answer that they may or may not have heard, but it really now allows you to equate it to how bad the problem really is. Yep. And I think a lot of times that's what I've learned is it allows you to differentiate yourself from just somebody that shares information that you read versus tying it in so they can actually see how bad the problem is, how something's improved. It kind of forces them to take action when they sense something beyond just a question, answer. It impacts their business. It impacts their life. Mm-hmm. It makes them think, in this particular case with ransomware, oh, okay, maybe I do need to listen to what that guy said and start backing up my data. Mm-hmm. And those type of things I think are real world. So that I try to apply practical tips that are best practices that are not too complex and that can be challenging in itself. But by doing that in interviews, whatever the medium is, people will walk away and say, okay, I picked up something. I learned a little tidbit that I can apply to my business, my personal life, my friend I can share this with. And I think that's what it's all about. If you're thinking about not your image, not how you look, how you sound, and saying everything perfect, be yourself, be true to yourself, but share something, impart some knowledge and teach. I think that interviews, whatever medium you're using, it's going to make it more effective. And it'll help you grow your brand. And that's really what's important. So preparing it, doing those type of things in line with it, with that in the back of your mind, really does help. Now, I don't know if you want me to speak about scheduling too, because scheduling, I'll be honest with you, I was a little nervous coming to Interview Connections. I think I shared some of my hesitations, reservations, not on the part of Interview Connections, on my own part. I'm trying to run a business, got a crazy life, lots of travel, do a fair amount of speaking, do a fair amount of TV and radio. I'm heading out to Black Hat next week. I have a whole 2 days worth of interviews with executives. I have a speaking session there. I'm doing a book signing at night. So I've got a full 2 days from getting off the plane to get back on and go to sleep. It's just like a nightmare. It's good, but it's a lot of things. Yeah. So trying to juggle that and schedule it becomes a challenge. So I think what's nice is, and in fact, really to your credit specifically, right, you got me started right away and keeping track of all the interviews, because I'm doing, I don't remember the exact number, 50 some interviews with Interview Connection. It's a lot. It's probably one a week on average. If you average it out, some weeks it's 2, some weeks it's 1. It changes obviously based on my crazy schedule. And then obviously the host of the show that I'm going on. But in addition to that, I'm doing other podcasts. I do my own podcasts. I do a live radio now every single morning. And then I do a weekend segment now also that's a live or rewrap. I'm going to be doing that. And then all the other stuff and running a business, it's busy. So having a schedule where I could fill in and just as quickly cross out, I usually use an Excel spreadsheet, it's very helpful. And I could post that behind me and it's fluid. It changes constantly. So when I'm at home, it could be 10 a.m., I can jump on there and make a tweak. And then tomorrow I could print it out and put it up behind me. So I'm using physically paper, but it's a soft copy electronically. So when I'm traveling, I have access to things, which I encourage people to jot it down. If you leave it to memory, you will miss an interview. You will disappoint. You will make a mistake. If you're a little crazy like myself, I call it organized chaos. And that's my life. Yeah. It changes from day to day. So today I'm doing a podcast. Tomorrow at 4:00, I'm the commentator on Computer America. So that's a video podcast show, and I'm on for 1 hour. So there's a host and I'm the commentator. So we'll be talking all about cyber for 1 hour. So tonight we'll actually review some stuff, think and meditate about topics and things that'll be good for that show. So I try to keep it within that tight 24-hour period. If you do it a week in advance, that you'll forget a lot of things. Yeah, keep it fresh, keep it current, keep it topical for interviews. And that really, I think, stands out, especially because I tend to be more in the live world where, yesterday or last week's news is not as important as what's happening today or about to happen. So keeping up and doing a lot of reading I'm not doing it as much physical books, but listening to audio books, and then also just reading the news, the headlines, subscribing to different blogs. I listen to different podcasts to soak that up. That's all going to help me be a better podcaster, be a better person on TV that gets interviewed, a better expert, better at running my business. So education is really key.
Absolutely. And I know the term in the trenches is somewhat thrown around these days, especially in the business community, and perhaps has lost a bit of its potency. But in this case, I can't think of a better term to just a very simple way to be able to more heavily ingrain yourself in podcasting in the media world, and just get a sense of, and of course each podcast varies, and even on the back end of scheduling things, as you know at this point, Scott, there are some hosts who will come back and go, oh my gosh, Scott would be a great fit for this show, let's have him on tomorrow. And we go, okay. And sometimes a host will come back and go, hey, so we're booked up for this season, but I don't want to miss out on an interview opportunity with him. I have slots open in September or October or a few months down the line, So that can be a little difficult to stay on your feet with, but it's really just a matter of practice. The more you do it, the better you get at it, right? And for everybody, and for everybody listening, I want to stress everything that Scott just said about scheduling and keeping track of your interviews. However you do it, you have to listen to Scott on this one, because Scott has sent me some of his scheduling and some of the things he uses to keep track of not just his interviews that he books with us here at Interview Connections, but also all the rest of his media appearances. And like I said, it will make your head spin a little bit when you look at it right off the bat, but Scott's is color coded. Everything is checked off in terms of what point in the booking process it's at. Maybe if the interview link has been posted, everything is right there, all comprehensive in one place. And I really can't stress the importance of that enough, because like you said, Scott, if you don't, you're going to miss something, you're going to make a mistake, and it's okay to make a mistake every once in a while. But if it's a preventable mistake, then if you have the power to prevent it, why wouldn't you? We have the technology, we have the tools at our fingertips. It's really just knowing how to utilize them. And everyone listening, listen to Scott on that, because he absolutely knows how to do that.
I was going to add too, if I can, Riley.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a really powerful, and I've been trying to do this after each podcast that I do. And I encourage other people to consider doing this if they have the time. It takes maybe 15 minutes if you carve out. I try, before going on a podcast, before going on TV, before going on radio, always listen to whoever's going to be interviewing you if you know it. Listen to the show, get a sense of their style. If it's very conversational, if it's more a little bit more formal, where they ask a rote series of questions and then they turn it to you and you have to respond. So if you know the format and the flow a little bit, when you do get into the interview, you're not as nervous. And then it becomes more conversational, because sometimes the first minute of anything, it's kind of getting over your own fears and nerves. How do I look? The lights, the sound, is everything working? And what am I going to say if they ask me something? It puts all of that to the side. Now you can focus on conversation. The more conversational you are, the more it comes out natural. I think the better it is, the better the information, the more chance the audience is going to tune in instead of quickly tuning out because somebody's reading maybe from a script or something like that. So give it your best. That I think is really important with all of the interviews. And then what I like to do is post interview when it's over, or post podcast, post TV show or something, thank the person. I know it sounds old fashioned or kind of cheesy, some people say, but I like to write a little thank you. Maybe if it's a particular point, maybe if they asked an insightful question or they drew you out, or they just had a great discussion, or whatever you could find the positive, share that with them. Because what it's also doing, it's reinforcing their hard work. A lot of people, they go on and they put on they're on TV, radio, or they're working hard on their own podcast, and they don't always get that feedback. You can ask somebody, please rate my podcast. And I do that also. I like to go on and give them an honest rating and give some specific things that I appreciated about it, and try to stay, again, positive if you can. It helps them get up there, and then they value you as a guest and the insight that you provide. But I think take that time, acknowledge that they had you on as guest. And then when you do get the link, that's, to me, the moment you should use that to promote it. And just put it out there, share it with the world. And it's not as much just trying to share about you and your insight and your expertise. And that is in part, but a lot of it's also thank you. It's part of the way you're thanking them. I was on this really exciting podcast. We talked about boom, boom, boom. Check it out. Subscribe to it. I subscribe to it. You know, that way you're kind of sharing some of the exposure, I think. And that's really important because it's a nice, tight-knit community, especially the world of podcasts. It's very different than TV. TV, there's layers. You've got, here's your anchor, here's your producer, here's your booking agent, here's, so on and so forth, that you have to get through and work through to be on TV and communicate. So it's very separated. Whereas podcasting, oftentimes, you're talking to the person that you're going to talk to ultimately through email, through chat, through the scheduling, maybe through interview connections is helping introduce people and make that intro to kind of save you time and check the show out. So you utilize those resources. I love it when you send me like a little mini intro because it kind of sets the stage. I get an email usually from Riley and it'll say, hey, bringing these two parties together, check out the pod. And what do? I get excited. Before I do anything else, I click on there and I listen to an episode or two. And I'm like, all right, now I got it. Oh, okay, this is a great conversation. Here's some thoughts I have. Now you're already thinking how to be a great guest, basically. So
yeah.
It takes a little bit of work on your part, everybody's part.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, already you're building a foundation for how you're going to bring yourself to that interview and how to more or less present yourself before you even have a touch point with the host. And it can be a little bit of a delicate balancing act, especially for folks who are perhaps new to podcast guesting or kind of using that as an official marketing strategy for themselves. As someone who is high profile, it can be very easy to kind of think, if I'm coming on this show, then the pieces will just kind of fall into place. And, I'm on this show with X amount of ratings. So we're both kind of at the same level. There's a mutual respect, which might be true. But I love the point that you made, Scott, about really just meeting the host where they're at. Because of course, and anyone who's heard any of the trainings that I've jumped on in our Facebook group in the Guest Expert Profit Lab, or really anywhere else, I've said this ad nauseum, but it bears repeating again and again, is the fact that podcasting really is a different beast than terrestrial media. It's way different than radio and TV, far fewer touch points. And the listeners, because of that, are often a lot more engaged than they would be just flipping through radio channels somewhere. They're seeking out this podcast specifically for its content that they can't get from terrestrial media, or if they are getting it, they're not getting it in a complete enough sense or an entertaining enough sense. So really, again, just kind of being a chameleon with it in a way, like almost like a social chameleon, just kind of meeting the host where they're at with their conversational style and establishing that baseline of what the show is like before, in many cases, before you even have an official touch point with the host. So by the time you get through all those steps, you get through booking, maybe sussing out a time, or maybe there's an interview pre-call just to discuss some preliminary topics before the actual interview is scheduled. By the time you finally get to that interview, who's more prepared than you to come on this show, right? and that's really what it's all about, because you, of course, you as the guest, you want to be reaching that show's audience and being as relevant to their needs and what they listen to the show for as possible. So at the end of the day, that's really the key. I think, and I love that you mentioned that, because there is a little bit of leaving your ego at the door in that sense, and kind of going, it's like being a guest in somebody's home. Like, this person is inviting me into their worlds, into their podcast, and many podcasts are passion projects for a lot of people, and they're very passionate about that, and thus they care a lot about the product that they're putting out. So the higher quality that you can make that product, not only is that going to make it better for the audience and for you reaching the audience, but it's going to make that host go, okay, this person has their stuff together. And who knows what networking opportunities could come from that.
Yeah, I think it's all the unknown. It's to me what's kind of exciting. I would say, if I had to put a number on it, probably about half of the podcasts shows that I'm on are video and audio. The other half are audio only, which I find interesting, because in my mind, I always thought about video only when I would do things, but then I would associate podcasting as an audio only format, and it's really not the case. So I think what I've learned is important is to make sure that you have reasonably decent quality equipment depending upon the format, and ask that in advance. Sometimes they'll tell you, or sometimes they'll do a little pre-interview and they'll explain, or you can ask that question there subtly. But if they don't tell you, don't show up and not be prepared to be on camera, or have poor lighting, or have a kind of a microphone that's so, or headphones that you can't hear, and you're fumbling through all the technical side. Now what happens is you lose your focus. Yep. You can't focus in on your interview. And that's not good. I'm nervous. I'm going away next week and I have tons of interviews. So I got to kind of bring the portable studio. And that can be challenging, because here you are, another state. Is Wi-Fi going to work? Is my battery? So you got to have backups, and you got to be prepared and have plan B and C, especially when you're in remote locations. It could be a different type of challenge there.
Absolutely.
And things to think about. So I think having that little, I usually take it as old school, piece of paper and write down a checklist. Make sure I check off each thing before an interview, before I'm going to go remote something to do a video, interview someone else, or they're interviewing me. And I find it beneficial kind of being at both sides of it. So sometimes I'm the person that's being interviewed, and I find it beneficial also as a host when I'm interviewing other people. So it helps you to kind of frame things and think both sides of the conversation. And it just makes you a better, I think, a better guest in many cases. So I always encourage people, if you're just trying to be booked on shows, consider having your own podcast, even if it's not every single day, every single week. That's okay. Maybe you do it sporadic and then just increase the frequency, but it helps round you out, maybe more as a speaker, but both sides of it. Again, host or guest, doesn't matter, because you kind of then anticipate and you can converse much better than just somebody that is only going to looking for guests and these specific things. You got to be a little bit flexible there and be open to challenge, I think, and make it more fun.
1,000%. And actually, funny you mentioned writing out a physical list of gear whenever you're bringing a portable setup elsewhere. It shot me straight back to, oh my goodness, maybe being 9 or 10 years old and packing up a PA system for a local open mic night or something. And my father was helping me pack. He goes, "Did you make an equipment list?" And everything's almost packed at this point. And I went, "No, I forgot." He goes, "Okay, take it all out of the cases."
Start again.
And and that's how you prevent from losing things. Okay. And funny enough, it reminds me of a sort of a dynamic in local entertainment or local music scenes that I'm drawing a bit of a parallel to, in terms of kind of overarching theme here of meeting the host where they're at, meeting whoever is hosting you where they're at. I've been a local musician for many years, many different genres, different scenes. And the one thing I found really consistent, if you really want to build a relationship with a promoter or someone who owns a space or someone who is running an event series, of course, you can just reach out by email or Facebook message and go, "Hey, I noticed you have this electronic music night going. I make electronic music. I'd love to perform. Here's some things here." That can work sometimes. But if you're close enough to the venue, if it's within your state or maybe within an hour or so drive, or whatever your tolerance for that is, just show up one night. Go out to the event. You're not only going to have a chance to potentially meet that host or that booking agent or promoter in person and have a conversation with them, but you're also going to get a sense of the type of audience that's there, the kind of music they really resonate with, and that can completely change your, I suppose, plan of attack. If you do end up getting booked for a set there, you go, "Okay, maybe I won't go with the really heavy aggressive stuff. Maybe I'll kind of ease into that. They really seem to be liking this more mellow vibe." And that can make or break being invited back, or your reputation in that local scene. And I think, of course, given the different format, I really think podcasting is a lot like that, because the more prepared you go into it, the more you are just going to naturally impress that person who is on the other line, and the better product you're going to come out with. And so Scott, I coming up on the last of my questions here for you, but I did want to touch on the importance of being able to improvise and be able to stay on your feet. You touched on it very briefly before. A lot of the times it can really be a matter of comfort, and I find the same way even when I'm performing music. I don't plan out a lot of my sets anymore. I have all my stuff organized. I know where everything is, and I kind of just feel it out, and I'll play music that is appealing to the people there. I'm not just going to stand up there and forcibly play music that I want to hear, and no one's dancing to it. No one's into it. Everyone's outside getting a smoke, or they're at the bar getting a drink, and no one's engaged. So I'd love for you to delve a little bit into that, just in terms of some things that have helped you to improvise and to stay on your feet. Perhaps if a host maybe asks a question completely out of left field that maybe you weren't expecting, whether it be good or bad, or again, really just the skills that go into being able to go with the flow of things in any given interview.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really fundamental in so many different ways. I think I've been able to slowly perfect. And when I say slowly, because I'm not there yet, I'm still working at it. I think realize, number one, you always have to work at it, but especially public speaking. I've done a lot of public speaking over the years. And oftentimes you can get up there and to your point, you have to be able to read the audience. And I think, again, all these different forms of media, you have to know your audience really well and be able to pivot. And for myself, I could be speaking about something, the dangers of using a debit card and getting attacked by a skimmer, if I'm talking about cybersecurity, and somebody, in the audience may raise a hand. I'm not going to ignore them. I'm going to direct the attention to them because they have a question they need answer. And I'm going to try my best to answer that question. And sometimes that question may be the dumbest question or the most obvious question in the world, but you don't say that. You don't want to embarrass the person, but rather you might want to reason with them or put yourself in their shoes. I try to do that often. And again, this is true if you're speaking in front of people. It's handled a little bit differently, I think, on TV, but even podcasting, you can do this. Because sometimes you'll be punched a question and I'm like, wait a minute, that wasn't one of the 5 questions he was going to ask me. So how do you respond? Well, a lot of times you want to preface it with, hey, Riley, you know what? That's an interesting question. I didn't think about that, but, I used to think about it and do things this way. However, what I've learned is now I do it this way or something. So basically it's not saying, Riley, you're an idiot. That was a dumb question. That's not relevant. No, you want to kind of postulate it carefully. So you're still giving dignity to the host, no matter what the format is, but you try to answer the question. And again, you answer it in a way that's going to be helpful to the audience. It's not to show how much you know. And I think that's the fault that a lot of people, you see these experts, these influencers, that are on TV, even getting paid a lot of money oftentimes, and they're speaking down to the audience and they're speaking down to the host, to the anchor, to the DJ, whoever it is. That's not appropriate. I don't think it is. For my style, I think that's wrong because you're missing the point. They're giving you an opportunity to speak and share your knowledge, your wisdom, to teach, your tips, your expertise, whatever it is. If they're giving you the power of the mic, you got to do that graciously. And I think you have to thank them for that privilege that you're even there, and think about your audience. How am I going to help my audience? As long as you keep that in mind, usually you can solve any problem there. And if there's a question, and I've had this happen a couple times, if there is a truly question that you do not know the answer to, maybe it's beyond your scope, it's out of your wheelhouse, beyond your expertise, then you want to be careful not to try to fake it. I've seen so many people that will try to yes through the question and make it up, and you're trying to follow their logic and you're saying, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. And that really breaks down not just your credibility as a guest, it actually hurts the network. It hurts the podcaster. It hurts the radio program. So you have to be careful. That's why I said, we were talking before, you got to really stay true to yourself and do the research. Regardless of what medium you're on, what media, doing your homework up front, I think is probably the most important. If you're not expert in that subject, you stay up all night until you become that expert. I've had times, I've had a phone call at 4 a.m. CNN has a limo outside your house to pick you up for an interview. And I'm like, it's 1 a.m. I'm going to get 3 hours of sleep. No, I'm going to be researching this segment. So I'm the expert. I'm going to get 0 hours of sleep. When I'm done, I'll come back home and go to sleep. So you got to focus that time that you have to make sure you really understand it. And if I could share just a brief experience, this happened recently. Please do. That kind of ties into the bigger picture that we're talking about. The importance, and I've done, I don't know, thousands of TV interviews, podcasting, I'm catching up. I don't think I've done 1,000 podcasts, but hundreds of them I've done. I know I've done, and I do my own show and other things. I'm getting there. And radio, I'm doing every day. This and that. So I'm starting to understand what differentiates all of them. But what I thought was really fascinating is the more you do, the more opportunities you have. And to this point, the more I started getting booked with all these different podcasts with Interview Connection, guess what else is picked up? Radio, speaking, be it virtual conferences or in person, and also TV, as well as more podcasting. But look what happened. By frequency in podcasting, and that's one of the few things that actually you can almost predict once a week, you're going to be on a podcast. So now what? If you're putting that out, your media channels, as we talked about before, sharing the show that you're on and the expertise and the tips and about that podcast, suddenly you're like this. You're in front of everybody's radar. So now guess what? The TV stations are calling you. The radio stations are calling you. People are emailing you. They want to blog, advertise, this, that. I had that the other week, and somebody said they saw me on so many different things. They thought I would be a good guest on somebody's podcast, and they reached out to me, invited me on. We connected because it was in cybersecurity. We had a great time. And I thought it was just another cybersecurity podcast, but it was one of those 20-minute or so podcasts that went on to about an hour because we had such great chemistry and communication. Afterwards, we kind of got off and we were just chatting like this, very casual, and started saying, hey, are you going to this show? And yeah, I'm going to that show. Are you there too? Yeah. He's, I'd love to do something with you there. I'm like, well, what do you want to do? He's like, well, you got these books. Do you ever do like book signing and stuff? I was like, yeah, I would love to do that. Okay, well, we buy X number of books. We got a big party. You can come in. You can do a book signing, maybe say a little something here, a little speech in front of this select group of executives that we have. Blah, blah, blah. So one thing simple that was just frequency of podcasting did what? It led to a specific podcast where somebody hired me. And then on top of it, okay, great. I feel privileged. Hey, great. I'm going out to Vegas, going to this great show. I'm gonna have a good time, and I have some other things I'm doing there. And then he called up and he said, you know what, I want to cover your expenses too for hotel and other things, because you're really helping our brand, because I noticed you're promoting the show and you've already invited guests that have signed up to come. And so again, that shows the more you do for other people, it comes back indirectly. I didn't do those things to hope that somebody would cover my expenses or buy X number of books or things. I did that because I genuinely care about the other company and the relationship building. And when you do that relationship building, it's the unknown that it leads to that sometimes is more rewarding than doing things very sequentially. And I think that's the exciting part about the world of media. Put yourself out there, but don't be too selective, because you don't know what's going to happen.
Exactly. And I would make the argument that consumers now, in terms of kind of sniffing out that sense of, am I actually being provided with some information that's going to be helpful here, like it's advertised, or is this really just an elaborate sales pitch for whoever this person is coming onto the podcast? I feel like I think consumers are smarter about sniffing that out now, really, than they ever have been. So intent matters. So by doing these things, by throwing, a book signing party, and, just kind of having takeaways and, other things that free of charge, things that you're not intending to make a return on. You're doing this because you want to get it out there and you want to help people. And you know that if people feel helped by the things that you're putting out there into the world and the information that you have to say, that loyalty to your expertise is going to develop itself naturally, which is the best way to do it. So I love that. I love that. So to wrap up here, Scott, so I'm going to give you an opportunity here to give a call to action. And this can also, this won't just be for your purposes here, Scott, so people can figure out where to reach you, where to listen to your podcast, where to find out more about you. But for anyone who's considering using podcast guesting as a marketing strategy, this is going to be a good example here. So pay attention. So a very good example of how to custom tailor a call to action based on what show you're on, based on what topics you're speaking to, everything really that we've covered in this interview up to this point. So Scott, where can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
Well, certainly they could always find out about me. Website is scottschober.com. I'm all over social media. So I'll usually give my Twitter is at Scott BVS for my company there.
Mm-hmm.
I have a number of other accounts also that are tied in and linked there as well. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and you name it, social media. I try to keep busy and again, not selling things on social media, but just really sharing things. And I think to that point, I always try to hone in. The more you are generous, the more you give away, as I mentioned earlier, it could be tips. It could be a pen. It could be a book if you wrote a book. It could be a tchotchke. Whatever you give away, usually it'll come back twofold, and you'll really start to benefit from those things. And to your point, Riley, it's not coming off salesy. And whenever I'm on an interview, be it a podcast or something, try to focus in on talking about problem, solution, without trying to sell product or service that you probably offer. Mm-hmm. Why? Because consumers are very smart. Business owners are smart. Customers are smart. They're going to see through that. So it's better to talk about the problem, whatever the problem may be, and even introduce solutions. And it may not even be your solution. Maybe you're one of the solutions or you talk abstract about it. But that's when do people find out about it is when they reach out. That's when the call to action, I think, actually solidifies. They're going to say, oh, that's right. I heard this cool podcast. This guy, Scott Schober, cybersecurity expert, he was talking about skimmers and the dangers at gas pumps and, not much is being done. And here's the problem. And here's what some of the solutions are out there on the market. I want to check this out and learn more about it, how I could stay safe and keep my family safe. Go to the website. Now, they might happen to see products there that provide those specific solutions that companies are using. They may or may not. But it's a very soft sell. I'm not trying to sell products and push my agenda. I'm trying to educate. And oftentimes educating is even providing free things, free tips, free resources, white paper, blogs that don't really cost people money. And I'm very cautious. My website, both my websites for our company and myself personally, is not to try to force everybody to give me every piece of information, DNA till present. If you want to download something and you provide your email, I'm happy to give this to you. If you want me to mail you a hard copy, I'll mail you a hard copy, no charge. That's fine. It's helping educate. Don't try to lock them into a sales process or a sales funnel when you're first having conversation, when they just heard your voice. It might turn people off, or probably will turn most people off that are professionals.
I could not agree more. Also, for everybody listening here, I highly encourage you to check out Scott's podcast, What Keeps You Up at Night. Not only does it have one of the funniest, best podcast arts that I've ever seen on iTunes, but really applicable for everybody. People of all age groups, all ranges of technology fluency. If you want to learn how to keep yourself safe on the internet and as a consumer, I can't recommend it enough. So Scott, again, thank you so much for joining me here today. I think our listeners are going to get a lot of value out of this. I certainly have, even just from some of the facts that you've shared here, maybe making me reassess some of my cybersecurity habits, as you very frequently do, which is a good thing. And yeah, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I loved having you here.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks again for having me on, and everybody out there, stay safe, please.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, on that note, on the note of not feeling salesy, I have a little call to action here myself. Interview Connections, we actually have an upcoming podcast guesting virtual conference. Now, this is going to be a little bit different than the free master classes that we've done before. But in the sake of opening up organic conversations, and Scott might be shaking a little over here just in terms of how unsecure this may be or not, I'm going to direct everyone who's listening to this, shoot me an email. My email, Riley, RILEY, @interviewconnections.com. If you guys are interested in how podcast guesting can open all these doors for you, like they have with Scott, and how they've just continued to provide more networking opportunities, and as opposed to giving everyone here a link or giving you some more information about it, it is upcoming August 10th to the 11th. It's a 2-day event. Send me an email. Let's start a conversation. I want to learn about you. I want to learn about what your goals are, and I want to see if we can help you out. So again, my email, Riley, RILEY, @interviewconnections.com. Send me an email. But otherwise, thank you everyone, of course, for listening to the Monetize the Mic podcast. I'm Riley Baez Bradway. I'm sure I will be back at some point soon. But in the meantime, for our next episode, enjoy Jessica and Margie back to their normal shenanigans. So again, everyone, thanks so much for listening. Have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you might be tuning in from. And I will see you next time. Take it easy, everybody.